Ever since I moved into the quiet cul-de-sac of Willow Lane, the neighbors had been peculiarly friendly. Every morning, as I fetched my newspaper or watered the front garden, I would receive cheerful waves and warm smiles from anyone who happened to be outside. It was a comforting routine, the kind that makes a newcomer feel like they've truly found a place to call home. That was until one crisp autumn morning when everything subtly shifted. The day started as any other. I stepped outside, greeted by the cool, misty air that autumn graciously brought. I waved to Mrs. Henderson, who was always punctual in her morning walks with her spry cocker spaniel, Charlie. But today she didn't wave back. Her gaze slid away from mine, her smile faltering as if she had suddenly remembered an unpleasant thought. Confused, but not overly concerned, I continued my morning routine. It wasn't until I tried to engage Mr. Thompson, the retired Navy officer who lived across the street, that I sensed something was truly off. Mr. Thompson, who usually regaled me with stories from his voyages, barely acknowledged my presence and hurried back inside with a muffled grunt. As the days progressed, the atmosphere in Willow Lane grew increasingly colder. Not just the bite of approaching winter, but a palpable chill in my neighbors' demeanors. The friendly nods were replaced by averted eyes and quickened steps. Conversations dwindled to monosyllables or died before they could even start. I couldn't understand it. Had I done something to offend everyone? Determined to get to the bottom of this, I decided to visit Clara, an elderly widow who lived next door and had always been especially kind. If anyone would tell me what was going on, it would be her. That evening, under the pretense of returning a dish I had borrowed, I knocked on Clara's door. The wait felt interminable until she finally answered, peeking out through a barely opened door. Her eyes darted nervously behind me before she ushered me in with a hasty whisper. "Quickly, come inside," she said, her voice trembling. Once inside, Clara seemed to hesitate, her hands wringing the hem of her apron as if trying to squeeze the truth out of the fabric itself. I waited, letting the silence stretch until it was almost unbearable. Finally she spoke, her voice a low, urgent whisper. "It started about a week ago," she began, casting a nervous glance towards her curtained windows. "We all received a letter, every single one on this lane. It warned us to stop being friendly with you. It said that bad things would happen if we didn't." I felt my stomach drop, a mix of disbelief and fear knotting tightly. "Who sent it? What kind of bad things?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Clara shook her head, her eyes wide with fear. "No one knows who sent it. The letters were typed, no signatures, nothing. And as for the bad things," she paused, swallowing hard. "The miller's cat was found. Well, it was found mutilated the very next day after the letters came. Everyone's scared, you see, scared that they might be next." The gravity of her words hung between us, heavy and ominous. I realized then that my presence might be endangering the very people who had welcomed me with open arms. But fleeing wasn't an option, not until I uncovered who was behind this cruel manipulation and why. Determined to restore the warmth to Willow Lane, I knew my next steps must be cautious and calculated. The question wasn't just who was doing this, but what did they want with me, and how far were they willing to go to drive me away? That night, after leaving Clara's house with more questions than answers, I found it impossible to sleep. The usual peaceful silence of Willow Lane felt oppressive, as if it were hiding whispered secrets in its shadows. My thoughts kept circling back to the mysterious letter and the chilling threat it carried. Who could harbor such malice towards me, a newcomer, and why cloak their intimidation in such anonymity? I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, when a faint tapping sound at the window caught my attention. At first, I thought it was just a branch moved by the wind, but the rhythm was too persistent, too deliberate. With a mixture of trepidation and resolve, I got up and approached the window. Peering into the darkness, I could see nothing beyond the glass but my own pale reflection superimposed over the deep black of the night. Yet, the tapping continued. Suddenly, the streetlight that illuminated my front yard flickered and went out, plunging my view into even deeper darkness. The tapping stopped abruptly, and a chill ran down my spine. I stepped back, my mind racing with panic and paranoia. Was someone out there, watching, waiting? The next morning, I decided it was time to take action. I could not let fear paralyze me or allow my neighbors to suffer on my account. I spent the day making inquiries, trying to find any clue that might explain who was behind the threats and the disturbing events. However, everyone I spoke to seemed genuinely unaware and just as frightened as Clara had been. The sense of community we once enjoyed was now tainted by a collective dread. As dusk settled that evening, I noticed something peculiar, a pattern in the way the streetlights flickered. It wasn't random, at least it didn't seem so. Each flicker appeared to follow a sequence, almost as if it were a coded message. Recalling old hobbies of decoding amateur radio transmissions, I jotted down the sequence from several of the streetlights. Taking my notes inside, I began to work on deciphering any potential message, substituting long flickers for dashes and short flickers for dots. An idea that seemed increasingly far-fetched, but I was desperate for any lead. Hours slipped by as I delved deeper into the puzzle. When I finally leaned back, exhausted but with a completed translation, my blood ran cold. The message was simple and menacing: leave or suffer. At that moment, a sudden, loud knock echoed through my house, startling me from my thoughts. I approached the front door hesitantly. Through the peephole, all I could see was the distorted image of someone standing very still, their face obscured by the shadows of the porch. My heart pounded as I debated whether to open the door. The knocking came again, louder this time, more urgent. Taking a deep breath, I unlocked the door and swung it open, ready to confront whatever waited on the other side. There, standing on my doorstep, was not the threatening figure I had expected, but a young girl, no more than 10 years old. She was one of the neighborhood children, Lucy, who often played in the streets. Her eyes were wide with fear, and she trembled as she held up a crumpled piece of paper. "Mister," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "This was in our mailbox today. My mom said I should bring it to you." I took the note from her shaking hands. Unfolding it, I read the hastily scrawled message, each word sending a new wave of dread through me. "They watch at night. They know. You can't hide." The unsettling reality that I was being watched, possibly even now, made my skin crawl. But who were they? And what did they want from me and this tranquil neighborhood? The deeper I delved, the more I realized that Willow Lane held secrets far darker than its peaceful facade suggested. As I reassured Lucy and sent her home, promising to speak to her parents later, I knew one thing for sure. I was far from the end of this nightmare. The real horror might just be beginning. With the ominous warning fresh in my mind and Lucy's fearful expression haunting me, I knew it was time to confront whatever lurked in the shadows of Willow Lane. That night, I resolved to stay awake and watch. I positioned myself by the front window, a vantage point that allowed me a clear view of the street and the flickering streetlights that seemed to be signaling a hidden message. Hours passed in silence, the oppressive stillness of the night weighing heavily upon the neighborhood. My eyes were trained on the darkness outside, searching for any movement, any sign of the mysterious watchers. It wasn't until just past midnight that I noticed a figure moving stealthily between the houses across the street. This wasn't the unsure step of a neighbor taking out late-night trash. This was calculated, a predator-like stealth. I grabbed a flashlight and quietly exited my house, determined to confront the shadow. As I approached, the figure paused and seemed to sense my presence, turning abruptly towards me. The beam of my flashlight caught their face, and my breath hitched. It wasn't a stranger or a masked intruder. It was Mr. Thompson, the retired Navy officer, his face twisted in a grimace of fear and guilt. "Mr. Thompson?" I asked incredulously, my voice barely a whisper. "What are you doing?" His eyes flickered with recognition and then despair. I'm sorry," he stammered, his voice shaky. "I had to do it. They made me." "Who made you?" I pressed, stepping closer. "Who are they?" He glanced around nervously, as if expecting someone to jump out of the shadows at any moment. "It's not safe. Not here. Not now," he muttered, then seemed to make a decision. "Come with me. I'll show you. It's the only way you'll understand." Reluctantly, I followed him to his house. Inside, he led me to the basement, where he switched on a light to reveal a wall covered in photographs and notes. It looked like the setup of a surveillance operation. In the center, there was a large map of Willow Lane with various houses marked in different colors. "These," he pointed at the photographs, "are from them. They watch everyone, and they use us to keep each other in line. It started as a neighborhood watch, but then it got out of control. They have information on everyone, secrets that could ruin lives." "And the letters?" I asked, my voice a mix of anger and dread. "They orchestrate it all. Fear keeps everyone in line. I was told to deliver the letters. If I refused, they threatened to reveal things from my past I can't let come to light." I stared at the evidence of extensive surveillance and manipulation, the depth of the conspiracy far exceeding anything I could have imagined. It was then that a chilling realization dawned on me. The control, the fear, it wasn't just about keeping the neighborhood quiet. It was about power, about someone exerting their will over everyone else. "Who is at the head of this?" I demanded. Before Mr. Thompson could answer, the lights flickered and went out, plunging us into darkness. We heard the basement door slam shut and the unmistakable sound of it locking from the outside. Trapped and surrounded by the damning evidence of a neighborhood conspiracy, we realized the Watcher had been watching us all along. The leader of this twisted control was someone who not only knew everyone's secrets, but had engineered a way to keep everyone under their thumb through fear. As we searched for another way out, I knew that uncovering and exposing the head of this scheme was now more than just about my safety or clearing the air. It was about freeing Willow Lane from the grips of a hidden tyranny. In the suffocating darkness of the basement, Mr. Thompson and I frantically searched for an alternative escape route. Amidst the looming shelves and scattered tools, I stumbled upon an old, rusted crowbar. With a surge of determination, fueled by desperation, I wedged it between the door and its frame, leveraging it open just enough for us to slip out. We emerged from the basement, breathless and on edge, aware that every second counted. The house was silent, eerily so, suggesting that our captor had left, confident in our confinement. We hurried out into the night, the air crisp with the tension of our unresolved plight. Determined to confront the mastermind behind this disturbing scheme, we decided to gather all the residents of Willow Lane. If there was power in secrets, there was greater power in unity and transparency. One by one, we woke the neighbors, explaining the situation in hushed, urgent tones. Despite their initial shock and disbelief, the gravity of our evidence and the realization of their manipulated fears spurred them into action. As dawn broke, the community convened in the center of Willow Lane, a mixture of fear, anger, and determination in the air. Confronted by the collective gaze of the neighborhood, the true orchestrator finally stepped forward, Miss Carmichael, the seemingly benign local librarian. Her facade of gentleness had always been a mask, hiding her manipulative and controlling nature. Miss Carmichael attempted to justify her actions, claiming she had only intended to protect the community from external threats and internal disputes by keeping everyone under her watchful eye. But her words fell on deaf ears. The revelation of her extensive surveillance and coercion stripped any semblance of sympathy or understanding from the crowd. With Mr. Thompson's testimony and the physical evidence from his basement, the residents of Willow Lane called the authorities. As the police arrived, Miss Carmichael was taken into custody, her reign of control brought to an abrupt end. The evidence of her actions would ensure a strong case, restoring peace and trust to the neighborhood she had so thoroughly manipulated. In the weeks that followed, Willow Lane underwent a transformation. The bonds between neighbors strengthened, built on new foundations of transparency and mutual support. Community meetings became frequent, focusing on real collective security and support rather than suspicion and surveillance. As for me, the ordeal left a lasting impression about the importance of community and the dangers of unchecked power. Though it was a harrowing experience, it reinforced my belief in standing together in the face of adversity. Willow Lane had survived its dark chapter, now ready to thrive in openness and mutual trust, free from the shadows of manipulation. The flickering streetlights, once ominous signals, now just a reminder of a night that changed everything, signaling a brighter future. Thank you for listening to my channel.